Welcome back, fellow designers, for day 3 of variabilization. So today we're going to learn how we're going to leverage this technique of variabilization to designing your portfolio, or even doing a design task, or even looking at how you're going to approach interviews. So we've, of course, in the past, we've done on the first episode, we talked about how you're going to use variabilization to design widgets and UI elements. On the second day, we talked about how we're going to use variabilization to design simple experiences such as login experience. And then today we are going to be talking about how we're going to leverage variabilization, the same technique, to approach a portfolio or an interview task. And this is going to be really fun. And also, I do want to thank all of you that have subscribed and have liked our content, because this is something that's really valuable. If you haven't already subscribed, please do subscribe. Click on the subscribe button, as well as the bell icon, so you're notified whenever we create this content, when we create new content for you. And so you get that notification. That's it. Let's get going. So I'm going to just do a quick recap. 3 simple steps for doing the variabilization. The first step, define your objectives. Second step, identify your variables. And the third is evaluate the different solutions. And so when you do this, and again, it might seem a little bit difficult in the beginning, but as you do it more and more and more, you become more systematic and smarter at this. And then you become like a really awesome problem solver. So I would say, keep practicing it. There is no place where you cannot really apply variabilization. Where if there's a problem, variabilization is your best friend. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. So let's think about creating a portfolio or doing an interview task. Okay. So what are the kinds of things that you need to think about? So from the person who's interviewing, they might have different specializations. So they might actually be specialized in research or interaction or visual, or a combination of those. That's the first variable that you're looking at. Then the second variable that you would look at is, what type of a company do you want to go into? So are you looking to get into a startup where things are more ambiguous, but you get to learn a lot, or you want to or you can have a lot of influence, or you want to go to a company that's scaling up, because then when you're scaling up, you can go in, set up those systems and processes and grow very, very quickly within that organization? Or do you want to go to a large company which is mature, has a lot of systems in place, and then you can go in and specialize on a specific area? Now, the other aspect that you want to think about when you're looking to apply for a job is, what kind of a company do you want to join? Do you want to join a service company or a product company? Again, both of them have their positives and negatives. But again, that's a personal choice that you might have. You might say product companies because I enjoy solving problems. I enjoy directly interacting with the customers and realizing the improvement that I did. Or if you want to go into service companies, you might enjoy working in different domains and solving a whole range of different problems. So again, this is another variable that you want to look at. Now, there's a third variable. Now, especially when you're given design tasks or interview tasks, they usually come with some set of time constraints. So you're looking at different kinds of time constraints. Are there time constraints in hours, days, or weeks? Now, based on these time constraints, your strategy for your task or your portfolio will change. And this is something that you want to be thinking about. And I will get back into this, and we will talk about how each one of these will change the way you will do your portfolio. That said, let's go to the next one. So in this aspect, now we're going to be looking at from a company perspective. From a company's perspective, they're looking at 2 primary things. The first one is your strategic abilities, and the second aspect is your ability to execute. Okay, when you're looking at your strategic abilities, they're looking at to see, hey, are you driven by a vision? Where somebody tells you, like, I dream of creating, simplifying, making work enjoyable for everyone. That's a vision, and if given a vision, can you break it down and understand what the strategy is, create a product, create a system, and all of that stuff underneath it? The second level is you're thinking, well, are you intent driven? So my intention is, I want, people to use my product more, or my intention is to create a product that solves a specific problem. So that's an intention thing. And when you're looking at, are you driven by a project? So you might say, hey, I want you to think about this set of experiences. I want to create a very simple login experience, or I want to create a very simple purchasing experience. So those could be something. Or you could be very execution driven, where you're looking at artifacts and you're shipping the artifacts and making things happen. Or you could also be at the level where you want somebody to tell you what to do so that you can get on to the next step. So again, your seniority depends on where you are in this whole spectrum. Obviously the vision-driven individuals are the senior most, whereas the instruction-driven individuals are the junior most in that whole ecosystem. That said, there's a second component to it, which is execution, your ability to execute. So when you're thinking about execution, let's go on to the next slide, please. When you're thinking about execution, there are multiple components to execution. So again, given your specialization, you could be looking at research. So it is like, hey, can you do method planning? Can you do recruitment, execution, analysis and synthesis, documentation? Or if you were doing, let's say, interaction design or visual design, you're looking at different aspects. So when you're doing interaction design, are you able to do your workflows? Are you able to do wireframes? Are you able to do prototyping? And are you able to document? And then if you were doing the visual design, what exactly are you doing? Are you able to conceptualize, do the foundations, do ideations? Are you able to converge, diverge, execute, prototype, and document? And finally, the last one is, how are you able to present? Are you able to present your content? Because again, in a workspace, it's really important that you do the work and then you present it to other people and get people to sign on to what you're doing and the way you're thinking. So I think that is something that is really, really important. So again, these are all the execution skills, and then you have the strategic skills that are that kind of look at the planning and the execution and the interaction and the project driven and all that. So those are all the strategic components. And so what we've done is when I go through them, for each of those skills, you might want to be able to have, it's a high, medium, low is, are you able to execute? And how much energy are you going to spend on them? Or are you able to manage that function? Are you able to manage the process of getting workflows done or wireframes done or whatever? So that's where you see the 4 different colors. So let's go on to the next slide. So I'm going to do a quick stop here, and I'm going to talk about, college. One of the reasons why we do this is because we're supported by the companies that hire talent. And so, I want to invite all of you for the College Hire-a-thon Season 1, where we have 2 main companies, UX Reactor and NB Healthcare. And both of these companies are looking for talent. So if you're interested in applying for these jobs, or participating in the Hire-a-thon, please click on the link in the description so that you can get notified and you get additional information. So this is best for designers with 1 to 5 years of experience. And the first Hire-a-thon is going to start in January 2022. That said, let's go on to the next slide. Now let's talk about evaluating solutions. So let's go to the next slide. So let's think this through. Let us say that, you are interested in specialization. You are good at interaction design, this individual. The type of company is a scaling up company. This company is looking to scale up very, very quickly. And the nature is it's a product company, and you have been given 8 to 12 hours to execute on a project. All right. And the role that you're applying for, or this individual is applying for, is an associate interaction designer at a company that's scaling up. And so when you're thinking about an associate interaction designer, this is, at a junior level of the spectrum. So when you think about that, so what is the company expecting on the other side? They're basically looking at someone who's got, who's basically, when given instructions, they can execute. And so consequently, they have the minimum professional etiquettes. It's something as simple as, can you make your timelines for the work that you've been given? Can you send minutes of meetings? Can you deliver on time? So that is where, so the overall focus in these kinds of opportunities is it's all about execution. These companies want to know whether you can execute or not, given that you're coming in at a junior level. And so what people are looking at is under interaction is, if you're going as interaction, you need to be able to execute. If you have execute under supervision of somebody else, so you might be able to execute on wireframes, workflows, and prototype things very, very quickly. And probably at the end of it, you may want to present that work, because again, it gives you the visibility and the opportunity to kind of talk about the work you're doing. And so, you are able to present your work, and you can talk about visuals and the artifacts that you've done. So this is something that works out really, really well. For a junior individual contributor, all you need to tell the other person is, can you execute on your work, right? And how much, and you do want to show a little bit of your professional etiquette is really important, and the way you communicate and the way you present yourself is important, because that helps you stand out apart from everybody else. Now, here's the thing. Now, if this is the bare minimum, let us say you are able to ideate and you have conceptual skills, or you're able to show some kind of conceptual skills. Again, this is where a lot of companies that are hiring junior individuals would look at this individual and say, yeah, you have the conceptual skills, so I can potentially see you growing within my organization. So they may want to hire you as an intern and later convert you into a full-time role. So again, this is something you want to do. So the key thing is, it's not about doing research or interaction visual and everything. You just want to focus on a specific area and demonstrate your skills in those areas so that you get that specific job that you're looking for, rather than try and do everything just okay, and and your hiring manager doesn't know how you're better than other applicants that have applied for the same job. Okay, so the moral of the story is, do things that are related to that specific job and do it really, really well. Do a few things, but do them well, so that you get noticed and you get acknowledged for the quality of work you're doing. So let's go on to the next slide. So here's another one where somebody is a junior individual contributor. Okay, they want to work in a product company, and they want to, they are a visual designer, and again, they've been given a similar time frame. So what would this person want to highlight? So clearly, because somebody's asking for visual design chops, you really don't need to focus on interaction design or research. Just focus on the visual components and get your job. So the idea is, focus on execution, prototyping, and documentation of the visual components, and you should be good to go. And if you have presentation skills that go with the structure, where you can talk about the overall story with the visuals, you are awesome. Right now, if you have conceptual skills, that's an extra positive. And if you can demonstrate that, and you can show that you have some interesting ideas that you were able to execute. Again, ideas are cheap. Execution is what companies are looking for. So if you have a good idea and you're able to show that you were able to execute on them, now you become a very valuable hire for that company. And again, don't do everything. Do the things that you know really, really well and get your job. So that's the second one. Now let's go on to the third example. And this is an individual contributor. So then that means this person can individually execute, does not need as much supervision. And this person is intending to work in a large company, in a large service company. And so the idea is they're specialized in research. So that you come in, and so notice, just because it's an individual contributor, they should be able to execute and do the whole process. So, and again, here by execution, I don't mean just do the tools, but not only are they doing the tools, they're also doing the conceptual work, and they understand what methods to use when and how. And so this is where, from an execution perspective, they should have their professional etiquettes, and they should be able to plan the overall task from start to finish. And they should be able to say, what are all the steps that are required, and how am I going to go execute, and what are the time frames? So it should be, these are bare minimum skills, because if you can plan your work, other teams know they can rely on you. All right. Now, again, when you come to research, again, because you're looking at an individual contributor, you should be able to do all of these things. You should be able to plan what method you're going to choose. You should be able to, plan your recruitment. Maybe in your company, and especially in large companies, they might have separate recruiters, but you should have your own strategy for recruiting. So like, who are you going to recruit? What demographics? How do you reject? How do you accept? And then finally, you're thinking about how you execute the study, and then how do you analyze and synthesize the data? How do you document it? And finally, how do you present it to get consensus for the work that you've done, right? These are, again, bare minimum skills. And so if you were coming in as a researcher in a large company, your portfolio simply needs to demonstrate these components. You do not need to, again, don't try to do everything. If you do everything, you may not have the time to showcase what you're really good at. And so that's what I would say is what you need to think about when you're doing the individual contributor. And generally, I've seen that, when you're looking at research, the interview tasks generally tend to be more on-site whiteboarding kind of exercises, because, your interviewers would want to understand how you're approaching the problem. So again, when you're doing that, make sure that you're showcasing your planning, make sure you understand the larger concepts, the different methods that you have, the choices that you have, and how you're choosing to execute what, and then do the communication accordingly. And that's good enough. Let's go on to the next slide. So we're going to look at an individual contributor who's looking to be an interaction designer in a large scale product company. And again, you have 8 to 12 hours to complete the task. Don't worry about research. You might just say, hey, here's an interesting problem I'm solving. So you don't want to say, I did all this research and I got it, because it's just going to focus your energy in an area that is not going to help in your hiring. If anything, if you share more information than is required, the risk is you will have a lot of questions that you cannot control. As opposed to that, the simplest thing that you want to do is, let's just say, okay, here's an interesting problem I'm trying to solve, and here's what I did for interaction. This is how I ideated. This is how I, converged on the ideas. This is how I executed. And that's very simple. And so again, from the strategy and planning perspective, you absolutely need to know your timelines, your planning, all the steps that are required to kind of go execute. And you, of course, need to have your basic professional etiquettes. And when you're executing, you just need to demonstrate your ability in interaction design and presentation. That's it. Don't worry about everything else and stuff in between. As long as you can prove that this is a problem I wanted to solve and this is how I solved it, that's good enough. Don't worry about all the other stuff. Now, let's go on to the next slide. Same thing with visual design. Now, if you were to do visual design, you were working in a large product company, again, the idea here is, non-negotiables are, you need to be able to plan, you need to have your professional etiquettes. And as far as visual design is concerned, you just need to nail all of those different components. And again, don't worry about the rest of the stuff. And again, this is one of those challenges where people tell me like, hey, do I need to show the whole process or whatever? The one thing for somebody who looks at a portfolio or who looks at a task is, I can tell somebody doesn't know what they're doing if they're trying to do everything and being really bad at it or mediocre at it, right? Whereas the people that know what they're doing will focus on their specific area of specialization, show it to me, and they will do a really, really good job, and that's good enough. And again, in a lot of cases, when people or companies give tasks that say, you have to do it in 8 to 12 hours, these tasks are usually bigger than, they will probably take a lot longer to really complete it end to end. And what the companies are looking for is, are you able to look at that task, break it down, prioritize, and focus on the areas that are more important to execute as opposed to doing everything. So that is a very, very important skill that you want to be able to demonstrate if you're going as an individual contributor or above. Now, if you're a junior, I get it. You probably did not know how to prioritize, or that's why you try to do everything. Okay, I get that. But if you are looking at an individual contributor or a senior individual contributor, you definitely need to have the ability to plan and prioritize. So let's go on to the next slide. So this one is super interesting. So let us say that you're an individual contributor and you're applying to a startup. Now, startups are interesting because you are probably going to do whatever needs to be done to get the job done. So they don't really care if you are basically saying, hey, I want, I can only do visual or whatever. They're basically going to say, hey, are you good enough to execute across the spectrum, interaction, visual, research, and the presentation? So that's what they're looking at. And presentation is probably not as important. Probably the more important components are your ability to execute under research, interaction, visual. Those are things that are more important. Because at the end of the day, startups tend to be a lot more informal. They tend to be a lot more nimble. And so even if you did a rough presentation and you communicated it, that's good enough, because the startup is going to keep evolving and keep moving forward, right? Keep in mind, startups are very ambiguous in nature, and it may not be for everyone, but if you enjoy the startup culture, the amount of learning that you can have in startups, like probably in a year, it'll be equivalent to, spending multiple years in other companies. So that's something that's, it's very rewarding if you enjoy that kind of an environment. Let's go on to the next slide. So this one is you're applying as a senior, and notice for the first time, you're actually seeing stuff in blue. And not just that, your seniority level from a strategic perspective, it's changed from being execution driven to project driven. So that means you need to be able to prioritize, communicate, plan, and also delegate to people. You need to be able to say which person is doing what. And so again, if you're going in as an interaction designer, you should be able to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to plan, I'm going to manage. You might have somebody reporting to you, or you may not have, in which case the assumption is, if you're able to manage, then you can do the job by yourself as well. So that is the underlying assumption, because I've had a lot of people that say, hey, I can manage, but I can't really do the job. Well, then you can't be a designer, because you need to know how it works on the ground before you can manage it. Otherwise, you're not in a position to tell somebody what the best way of doing it is. So again, coming back to this, you should be able to manage the workflows, the wireframes, the prototyping, the documentation, and then you should be able to drive the presentation aspects, or maybe even manage the presentation aspects depending on your leadership skills and the type of team that you have. And again, one of the things, if you notice, is convergence is in management, because when you are converging, you probably have like a number of people on your team. They're all kind of thinking about ideas. You need to be able to take all those ideas, converge, and identify the best set of ideas and move forward. So that is also a skill where you are able to identify the opportunities in all these different ideas and bring them together and start creating a cohesive picture. So that is what I mean when you're saying you have to manage the convergence aspect of things. Now, execution is not being, we haven't put a lot of weight. We assume you know how to execute, but we also, realize if you're going for a senior role, you're probably supporting other people who are going to be executing, and you're going to be giving them inputs. So that's the game plan that you need to do there. And so when you're looking at it from a portfolio perspective or even a task perspective, companies are looking to see, well, do you have the scope of thought in terms of strategy? Because again, this is the first time where the focus is shifting from execution to strategy. They're looking to see whether you have strong strategic abilities. And then they're looking to see, well, what kinds of problems have you managed? How did you manage them? How did you structure them? What were the challenges? And so those are the kinds of questions, and so that your portfolio or your body of work would need to answer. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. So this one is one where you are a senior UX designer in a company that's scaling up. So again, your strategic skills are the same. However, if you're a senior UX designer that's scaling up, you would probably, your breadth of knowledge has to be a lot broader. So you are expected to know enough about research, interaction, visual, as well as presentation to be able to manage the process. At least you need to have that. That means you should have spent enough time in working in each of those domains. And again, understand, in a company that's scaling up, their teams are probably small, but they're looking to hire a lot of people. And so they're looking for people who can come in, set the processes, hire new people, get the work done from them. And so that is the thought process that these companies that are scaling up are looking at. And so you definitely need to be, really good at execution and delegating and managing the work. And so that is why you see a lot of blues in here, because you are helping the organization scale up its design function and its ability to execute quickly. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So here's a question. So, the question is, how would you distribute your time for, if you were applying for a senior visual design role in a company that's scaling up, and they've given you 3 to 5 days for a task, right? Now, I'd be happy to, I'd love to hear your answers. So do type in your answers down below. And again, if you want to see this and you want to learn more about how to approach portfolios, this is a really good way. And again, the moment you color stuff in a certain way, then your portfolio or your body of work needs to communicate that you have the ability to do the work at the level of strategy that you're expected to do. All right. So do drop your answers and your comments, and I will give my answers. I will be able to give you feedback, or share my thoughts. Let's go on to the next slide. So with that said, variabilization is done. So again, I'm hoping that you kind of understand the scope of variabilization. It's pretty broad. It goes all the way from basic UI stuff all the way to even portfolios or doing your interview tasks. And again, this is a skill that will be with you and it'll help you a lot. But this is a skill that you have to practice and build over time again and again. And that's something that you want to do. But again, the other thing is, if you really like this content, if you've enjoyed what we've been talking about and you want to learn more, and our mission is to basically demystify design and put all the content out there. So for people that are interested in learning, we want you to get access to all this content. If you like this and you want more of this, please don't forget to subscribe, click on the bell icon and tell us what you want to see. We'd be happy to kind of create content around that. Thank you very much. See you.